Woke up one night to a loud bang. Looked out the window and saw someone had crashed into the tree next to the apartment I lived in. Saw the driver get out and run away. People Askreddit, what is the most fucked up thing you have seen? When I was 10, I was hanging out with a couple of friends, riding our bikes. This truck comes flying down the road, and we jumped out of the way. One of my friends didn't make it. He almost made it, which made it even worse for him. The truck swerved to avoid us, and in the process, my friend's leg was run over, and he was dragged for what seemed like an eternity. He screamed, which damn near drowned out the sound of the truck's screeching tires. I was told I saw it, but I don't have any memory of seeing anything. Only the horrific sounds. There was very little left of my friend's face, after being dragged so far on the pavement. Just thinking about it makes me want to cry. Another time, when I was 13, I was in a wreck with my mom and brother. After it was over, my mom said I looked at her and screamed. Again, I don't remember that part. My mom's nose was split in half, like a Venus flytrap. We never knew how that happened, but it did. I'm so glad I don't have that image in my head as well. When I was about 9, my friend Jason called to say he was coming over. This was the 80s, so no cell phones. So, after he was taking way too long to get there, I called. His grandma said he'd just left a little bit ago. So, I waited, he still didn't show. We lived in a dangerous part of town in Section 8, and so I started to get nervous again. He was only a block away, why would it take so long? I called Gram again, and she was like, well, maybe he saw a friend on the way, check outside. So, I did. I went outside and his dead body was by the entrance to my building. His coat and shoes were gone. It seemed someone murdered a little boy for his fucking stuff. I had the pleasure of discovering him and testifying at the guy's grand jury later. Reply: my heart breaks for you and his family. I don't think I could see the world the same after that. Holy shit. I've seen a lot of stuff and that is absolutely heartbreaking. I'm so sorry for what you and that little boy endured. No matter how messed up a neighborhood may be, there's always an illusion that the innocent kids who live there are untouchable. I guess stories like these always brings me back to reality. I didn't see the accident. But while living in Jamaica, I saw a man carrying a mangled body just walking in the country. I later learned they were brothers, and worked construction together. One brother fell from a great height, and the other brother was just carrying his body, walking towards the hospital even though the brother had died on impact. He was just in a terrible sad mania. When I was in high school, the drama teacher was walking around on the catwalk high above the auditorium and she got her hair stuck in an exhaust fan. At that time her hair was almost to her knees. Her scalp was ripped off and I saw her in the hallway with towels and blood everywhere. She was in shock and shivering on the ground. The school went into lockdown and we were escorted to a different area so we didn't have to see the aftermath. Unfortunately, I saw it before that happened. She was in the hospital for nearly a year recovering. Reply: I can't imagine the pain once the shock wore off. The thought of being scalped makes my skin crawl. When I was a senior in high school, I was a TA for the Viscom class, visual communication. They had students do the morning announcements, make student films, etc. Well, I was helping to grade midterms, so I headed to the class right before lunch ended. No one was in the class and there was blood everywhere. Turns out my teacher had tripped and hit his head on one of the concrete blocks used to hold up the sets. He was in the hospital for a month, and eventually came back to school with a huge nasty scar. He had cracked his skull, but another student was there and able to call 911. Got called to the ER to help work a code. It was a man who had a bloody nose that simply would not stop bleeding. By the time they got him to the ER, he had lost so much blood he was in arrest. Doing CPR on a dude who died from a bloody nose is something I'll never forget. So much blood. Got called to the ER to help work a code. It was a man who had a bloody nose that simply would not stop bleeding. By the time they got him to the ER, he had lost so much blood he was in arrest. Doing CPR on a dude who died from a bloody nose is something I'll never forget. So much blood. From what I remember, the patient had experienced some facial trauma maybe a week prior. Something in there sprung loose and there was just no stopping it. Reply: I had my tonsils and adenoids removed when I was 12. I was in hospital for a few hours after my surgery, but after they sent me home, I started hemorrhaging from my throat. I woke up choking on my own blood with it coming out my mouth and nose. Had to go to the ER. They told me the good news is that I narrowly avoided drowning on my own blood. The bad news was that they couldn't get the bleeding to stop. They gave me a shot of vitamin K in my ass, something else in N4, and when those didn't work, they put me under for emergency cauterization. From what I understand, it was sort of a mess in there, so they ended up cauterizing a lot. Sometimes when I swallow a lot of something, I can still feel the scar tissue keloid things. Breathing through one nostril has been restricted since then as well. Reply. This was me. Severed sphenopalatine artery. Broken nose week prior from blunt force trauma due to rugby. Nasal septum pierced the artery and it held in place for 1 week. Had a blood pressure spike which ruptured the lodged septum, resulting in catastrophic arterial bleed from my nose. Resulted in respiratory, followed by cardiac arrest. 4 operations and 4 weeks in hospital, including stints on ICU, HDU, and specialist ENT wards. 5 blood transfusions and a very traumatized A&E department. So much so that my dad, also a doctor, found the junior doctor crying in the cubicle, and he just hugged her and told her it wasn't her fault. She was the first to treat me and felt that she hadn't dealt with it properly. As my dad said, "How the heck are you supposed to know the cause when blood's spurting out of 22 fit and healthy year old's tear ducts, nose, and mouth?" Car accident OMW home from work. I stopped to call 911 and got out to check on people. The guy I had checked on was holding his intestines in his lap. I don't have a clue how I was able to stay composed for his sake, telling him everything was fine. It was just a scratch, yada yada. When I was 13, I saw my best friend get plowed by a car when he was crossing the street. The side he started at had backed up traffic, and so you couldn't see the other side of the road. Alex just walked right across without looking, and a guy in a Buick sedan nailed him. He flew over the end of the car. He tried to get up, but when he did, both of his femurs snapped. I think that's when he passed out. That was about 20 years ago, and I still think about that every now and again. When I was a paramedic, I got called for a self-inflicted gunshot wound. It was an 80-year-old man. Apparently the day before he buried his sister, and she was the last one of his family and friends left. Everyone in his life had died. He decided to put a 12 gauge under his jaw and end it all. The wall was covered in skull fragments, chunks of brain matter, and what was left of his head just looked like mangled hamburger meat. That wasn't the worst part though. Like how this happens, but his face was laying next to his head, completely intact, halfway dangling off of the pillow that he'd laid down on. That was almost 10 years ago, and I'm still bothered by it. Reply. I had a call like that. The guy was suicidal after a terminal diagnosis, and his family thought they had removed all the guns from the home. He found an old shotgun in his attic. When we got to him to pronounce, all that was left was the back of his skull and lower jaw. He was wearing a red silk robe, blue pajama pants, and slippers. I looked up as I tagged him, and there was a black and white cat watching us. Spooky. I felt so bad talking to his poor wife. And this is why I support assisted suicide. Person gets their dying wish, and the rest of us don't have to be totally traumatized by a messy suicide. Thank you for listening to another B-Town Reddit Stories episode. Hit the subscribe button and check out our channel for more stories. Let us know your opinion about this topic in the comments.